So this question says, describe one way the cognitive area is different from the individual differences area. Use examples from relevant courses to support your answer. Now, if you're comparing approaches, when we've evaluated approaches, we've looked at kind of things like, in fact, I'm going to put it on a Word document so that you can see basically what I mean, so you're not just trying to listen to what I'm saying. Okay, so you know the question. So we can, does it say difference? Yeah, so we're looking at a difference between cognitive and individual differences. Okay, so if we put a grid on, I love grids. Grids are very kind of like, or table, whatever you want to call it, are very easy to kind of like figure out what you're going to do in terms of an answer. They're good for planning things. So if you think about the research method, we've got cognitive individual differences. So let's see. Research method, what else? Data, ethics. So thinking of like needs things. Example doesn't count because it's about approach. Practical applications. Reductionist. Scientific. Deterministic. Okay, let's just use those just for now. So, cognitive approach is very scientific because it uses a lot of lab experiments. So you can actually have that one up there as well. A lot of the things that are investigated, you're looking at things like memory, you're doing them all in controlled settings. So they're very, very scientific. They're easy to kind of like measure things. Although having said that, you might say it's less scientific because you can't operationalize memory, for example. We can't actually measure memory, we don't know what it is. We've got this kind of concept, this theoretical concept for what it is, but we can't actually kind of locate where it is and what it is. So you can't really falsify it in a way, not completely. It's very difficult to kind of measure it. It's probably not measurable, it's probably the best way to kind of talk about it. So you can say, you know, it tries to be scientific because it uses these lab experiments, but it can't really, you know, you can't really measure things like memory because you don't really know what it is and where it is. Whereas individual differences, they use case studies because you're trying to look at how everyone's different, how everyone's unique, and you kind of are looking at people on an individual basis. In terms of data, you're going to get lots of qualitative data for individual differences, but because it's in a lab, cognitive ones are usually quantitative. You have a lot of people with cognitive as well, so you have a lot more people that you're sampling because you're looking at things that you assume are similar in everybody, like memory, attention, perception. Most people are quite similar on those, so you get lots of quantitative data. Let's think. Reductionist. Cognitive is quite reductionist because it just thinks that it's just like thoughts. Individual differences is a bit more holistic because it looks at kind of both nature and nurture as well. Looks at kind of how they're kind of interacting with each other, whereas cognitive would be a bit more kind of on the nature side, because it's suggesting that, you know, thoughts are kind of like already in your mind. You haven't got kind of a choice over those. Then in terms of deterministic, it's very deterministic. You can't really change your thoughts. Individual differences is not scientific because you're collecting loads of qualitative data, which means there could be lots of subjectivity in terms of interpreting the data. They've both got practical applications, so they've got a real world use. Things like police questioning, if you think about Loftus and Palmer, and then also students and how they revise. Individual differences can be applied for phobias, you know, treatments, dealing with people with autism. But remember, you're talking about the approach, not just the studies. So you kind of think of like it's an individualized treatment, whereas cognitive, you know, helps a wide range of people. I mean, this question, you could have, I mean, you're just picking one, so it's quite simple in that sense. You could have said something as straightforward as the cognitive approach believes that behaviour is due to internal mental processes such as memory, perception, attention, and individual differences. Believes that it's due to everyone being different and being unique, and you can decisional factors and you can measure it with psychometrics. You could have put that and got the marks, but I'd kind of like say that that's a bit of an iffy one because it's obvious that the approaches are different for that reason. You're going to get kind of a higher kind of banded answer if you think of a point. So one like this. So for example, they use different methodology. So cognitive approach tends to use lots of lab experiments because it's controlling for things and testing things like internal mental processes such as memory, attention and perception. Whereas individual differences looks at everyone being unique and different, so would you use case study methodology to investigate the change in behaviour over time. You know, you might put something like longitudinal, longitudinal. You could put that in. You could say things like, so we're looking at difference, so we can't have practical application because they're similar. You could say that they're different because cognitive approach is a lot more reductionist than individual differences. You don't just say one is reductionist and one isn't. You can say just one is more so than the other because they're all on that kind of spectrum. So cognitive approach is more reductionist because it suggests that you can look at behaviour from a small component part such as your thoughts and that all your behaviour is influenced by that thought, whereas individual differences would look more holistically and would say that yes, it is due to dispositional factors such as whether you're going through the Oedipus complex or not, but it can also be affected by your kind of social environment and what impact that has on how you go through those stages. If you were, say, for example, using Freud to support your point. You can talk about cognitive being very scientific, but then individual differences not being very scientific. So there's quite a few things there that you could have spoken about. If you have a look at the mark schemes for that type of question, maybe not between cognitive and individual differences, but between maybe two of the other approaches, the mark scheme will be the same for, you know, each question. It'll give you, some examples of what you could put on it. So have a look at that and see what they actually say. I'll see if I can find it right now and put it on the end of this. Okay, so this one here is, I think this is from an A2 paper, but you can use them across. They've just given 8 marks for it on the A2 paper, whereas it would be a 6 marker on your AS paper. So it says compare the psychodynamic perspective to the individual differences area. They've talked about things like data, ethics, reductionism, determinism, ethnocentrism, methodology, designs, reliability, validity, individual situational and usefulness. So they've, there's all the kind of things that I've mentioned there and then, more. And then they've actually got so in actual fact this one is doing a comparison, so this one's a similarity and a difference, whereas your one was just looking at a difference between them. So that's why it was out of 5 marks for you, rather than 6 as I said before. So out of 5 and this one's out of 8. So they've done it, this is an A2 paper with 4 and 4. So it says one similarity between the individual differences and the psychodynamic perspective is they both provide individual explanations for behaviour. For example, Freud's study from the psychodynamic perspective, Hans is, oh, that's in the wrong place, that apostrophe, isn't it? That's really bad because he's not called Han, he's called Hans. His functional behaviour phobia and his fantasies, dreams were documented, and these were unique experiences to him showing his personal development. Also in Baron Cohen's study from the individual differences area shows how behaviour, recognising emotions in the eyes task differed from individual groups of people. This shows the focus of each area perspective is on the individual's uniqueness and how they are different in their behaviour to others. Bear in mind, Freud, we haven't learnt about psychodynamic perspective yet, but it is in there as well as in the individual differences approach, because both of them can explain the behaviour, so don't worry about that too much. A difference between the areas is the level of control in the research. Baron Cohen's study has a lot more controls in place for extraneous variables such as the eyes task, 3 seconds to show the eyes and the emotions to select from, whereas Freud's didn't have a lot of control in it because his theories are about kind of the Oedipus complex and things like that, so you don't necessarily need those controls, you just need time to talk to people about it. In this case, little Hans and his phobia of horses. So hopefully that's given you some idea of what things you could write about. It's quite an easy question really, you're just using that one point to explain kind of what the difference is between the two approaches, combining the assumptions with the point that you make, and it'll be a fab answer.